Today I'm talking about tents. Specifically, I'm talking about two tents. I'm talking about the Zpacks Triplex and the Zpacks Duplex, and my overall opinions of using them. I've used the Triplex now. I've had it for about a year and a half. I used the Triplex on my Pacific Crest Trail through hike, which took place last summer of 2023. And so that was about a 5-month use period, and I've used it on and off since then. And then the Duplex, the slightly smaller version of the Triplex, I used back in 2021 on my through hike of the Continental Divide Trail. That was about a 6-month use period. So basically with this video, I want to give anyone who's looking at these tents, buying one of these tents potentially, some recommendations on what I think they're good for, what I think they're bad for, pros and cons compared to the traditional tents. I'm going to just run over some quick general information about these tents. The Triplex is currently on the market for $799, so it's quite expensive. I paid $849 for mine back in 23 before my PCT through hike. I think that was because of COVID and the effects it had in the market. The Triplex is 60 inches width by 90 inches length, so that's 5 by 7.5 feet, 48 inches tall, which is the same as the Duplex. The weight that Zpacks lists on their website, 1.48 pounds for the thicker material tent, and the 0.75 ounces per square yard, so that's just the thread count in the fabric. So that's 1.48 pounds. And the thinner material, the 0.55 ounce per square yard, is 1.34 pounds. Now I have the thicker one, the 0.75 ounce per square yard, and I actually weighed mine at 1.539 pounds. But that could also be, I patched the tent a few times, and it's the same for the Duplex. We get holes inevitably, so the patches could be adding a little bit of weight, so maybe that's the difference, but it's really a pretty minor difference in weight. The Duplex is currently on the market for $699, so it's about $100 less. It's 45 by 90 inches, so 7.5 feet length, 3.75 feet width. Again, it has the 0.75 ounce per square yard thread count and the 0.55 ounce per square yard thread count. And the thinner one is 1.11 pounds for the Duplex, and the thicker thread count is 1.24 pounds for the Duplex. I weighed my actual Duplex, and it came in at 1.188 pounds. So again, a little bit more. It weighs a little bit more in reality than what they list on their website for the Duplex. Same with the Triplex. It's really a very minor difference in reality. But again, I patched both of these tents, so that probably could make up the difference, and that probably explains the difference. If it's straight out of the box, they might be the same as what is on the website. So now that I got that general information out of the way, I'm going to show you guys inside, and then I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the Triplex compared to more traditional tents. Okay, so here is the Duplex. Have it all set up. That's the Triplex in the back. You can see how wide the Triplex is compared to the Duplex right here. As I pointed out, both these tents are the same height, and that will depend on how you set it up, but they're about 4.5 feet tall. The Triplex and the Duplex also, I was surprised to find out they're the same length. They're both 7.5 feet long, so if you're tall, these should work. Sometimes your bag will rub up against the end and get condensation on them. Even me, I'm 6 feet tall. The only difference really is the width. The Duplex is 3.75 feet in width versus the Triplex, which is 5 feet in width. So here's the inside of the Duplex. Just for some scale, this is me laying inside my Duplex, and as you can see, I fill it out pretty good. This tent's 7.5 feet long, so I got plenty of space up and down, but side width wise, I fill this thing up pretty good. So if you're a wider guy, this will work for you. It may not work for 2 people though, which was my experience on the Connell Divide Trail with my wife. We upgraded to the Triplex on the PZT specifically because this duplex we found specifically was not wide enough for 2 people. It worked, obviously. We used the whole trail. It was really close quarters. We couldn't fit any bags inside. I woke her up a lot rolling on top of her. So as you see, I'm on one side here and I'm running into this wall here, and my wife would be right next to me right here, and she probably has about 2 feet of width to actually sleep in, and it's really just not enough for both of us. So I think the 2-person, this is typical for most tents, but the 2-person designation, you know, it can fit 2 people, but it won't be the most comfortable sleeping arrangement, especially if you move a lot or your partner moves a lot. I'd recommend probably upgrading to the Triplex just for that extra room. Okay, and here we are on the Triplex. As you can see right away, you can probably make out how much wider this thing really is. Both of these I can sit up pretty good in, which is a real benefit of these tents. The triangle shape allows you to really sit up and be comfortable inside when you're cooking and the such. But yeah, here I am laying down. Got plenty of room right here for my wife. We could even fit bags and food bags inside. If 2 people are through hiking, I'd recommend the Triplex just for the space, especially if you're wider people. If you're both slender, the Duplex probably will work. But the Triplex will be more comfortable in general. And really, it's not that much heavier. It's like 0.3 pounds, I think, heavier. The Triplex about 0.3 pounds. So it's not a huge trade-off for the extra space. And I think it's totally worth it. When purchasing these tents, you do have to take into account both of these are both 7.5 feet long. I'm like 5'11", and with my sleeping bag and my sleeping pad, I found that in the morning, condensation is an issue in these tents. I'm just gonna say that straight out. And I'll talk about it a little bit later. But in the morning, you'd have a lot of condensation on the sides, even inside, because these don't breathe the best, just being a single wall tent. And with that sleeping bag kind of jutting out a little further than your legs, my sleeping bag would often, and this probably happened most nights, would rub up against the side of the tent and get wet. And I'm 5'11", so that's an average sized guy. If you're tall, even though the length is 7.5 feet, you know, you can expect to really get that condensation on you in the morning, on your head and on your feet, where they make contact, where your sleeping bag makes contact with the side of the tent. So that's just an issue because of the way these tents slope down. Now my wife, that's a different story. She's shorter. And if you're a shorter person, you can pretty much sleep in these tents without making contact with those walls, without getting that condensation on you. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm just gonna quickly show you the exterior of both the Duplex and the Triplex and how they kind of work. So basically, it's the same for both. You have 2 supporting hiking poles on either side of the tent. You can see on the Duplex too. And then there's these guy lines that come down. You stake into the ground, and then you basically use these to cinch it tight. And then you also have 4 stakes that are vital on each of the corners, as you can see. Same with the Duplex over here. And then you pretty much, so you stake it all the way. You put these trekking poles up, cinch everything tight. You sometimes have to adjust a little bit, because if you adjust unevenly, the tension, there will kind of be like, this fabric will kind of be wavy and will trap water. So you have to make sure it's the tension is distributed fairly evenly. And then on top of that, these are optional. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't. If we think it's going to be a bad condensation night, we'll typically use them. You got some extra stakes. You can see on this side too. On the Triplex, you got 3 of these extra stakeout areas, stakeout points, and basically what that does is it kind of opens up this flap down here, kind of stretches it out, and this is a breathable mesh material. So basically it just allows, and you can adjust them inside too with these little strings, but it allows more airflow through the tent, which can help with condensation. Still doesn't negate condensation. You'll still have an issue with condensation, but it can significantly help. Same here. Here's the Duplex. Got the air flap. But here on the Duplex, you can see there's only one of those strings to open up the ventilation port. So that's an important thing to note. Other than that, these tents are designed very well to kind of shed water and snow weight. I've had it do well in snow as well. I'll talk about a bit. But as you can see, they both have this kind of bowed-in area between the trekking poles at the top, and then a very gentle, and if you adjust the tension right, very flat slope. So rain will just run straight off. This material is pretty much impermeable, unless there's holes in it, which do form in the thinner materials I've found. Pretty much all the rain will run straight off this tent, and the snow as well will kind of just cascade off the tent. Sitting inside my Triplex, I'm going to go over some pros and cons of the Zpacks series of tents, the Triplex and the Duplex, compared to more traditional freestanding tents. So some pros I found of the Zpacks is the excellent weight, of course. Talked about it already, but the Triplex only weighs about 1.5 pounds. The Duplex weighs about just over 1 pound, to 1.24 pounds for the thicker material. And when you compare that, I brought my traditional freestanding tent. This is a REI Half Dome 2 Plus. You can see that the weight on this thing is 4 pounds, 14 ounces. So that's almost 5 pounds, and it's even more than that because you carry the ground sheet as well. So it ends up being a lot heavier than these Triplex tents, and that's really their claim to fame, is the ultralight weight, which for backpacking, for through hiking, is really helpful, because you don't really have to even think about throwing this thing in your pack. Even for day trips, weekend trips, when you use these freestanding tents, it's often just a pain kind of evening out the weight between you and your partner, or if you're alone, it's just heavy. But you'd often try to, like, you know, give the actual fabric outer to someone and give the poles to someone else. With these Triplexes, the Zpacks tents, you don't have to think about it. You're still in your pack and you barely notice it's there. So I found that very useful, and just takes a lot of thinking out of the backpacking experience. Secondly, these are really easy to set up. With myself, it probably takes 6 or 7 minutes to set up the Zpacks tents. At first, it can take a little while. There's a little bit of a learning curve. Mostly just learning how the tension system works, and how to evenly distribute the tension around the stakes on the exterior of the tent. That's the main learning curve. But once you get into the groove of it, once you kind of understand how these things work and how you set them up, as I said, it takes me alone, it's probably about 6 minutes on average to set up. With me and my wife, when we were through hiking, it probably only took 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes to set up, because each person does half the tent, kind of working together. And I found the ease of setup, the quickness of setting up very useful, especially compared to these traditional tents. With all the poles and all that, it probably takes 15, maybe 20 minutes, depending on how complicated the tent is to set up. And I'm sure you can get fast at that, but these things are really easy to set up, which is a huge benefit, especially if you hike 25 miles. You don't really want to spend 15-20 minutes extra just setting up a tent that you really want to get in, especially if you're cold and you're wet. You just want to get in that tent as soon as possible. Comfort, both of these tents are very comfortable. As I said, the Duplex for 2 people, maybe pushing it, maybe a little bit small depending how big the people are. The Triplex, it's a little heavier than the Duplex, but my wife and I'm a wider guy, found we had plenty of room. We had room in between us where we could put bags. So the Triplex is very comfortable, very spacious, Both of these tents are 4.5 feet tall, so if you're sitting up, unless if you're a really tall guy, you can pretty much sit up in the tent and just cook right out the side, which we use pretty much every night. And that's a really great benefit, especially compared to some traditional tents. Some of the 2-3 person traditional tents you can sit up pretty well, but the smaller 1-person, 2-person tents, some of those tents, they're very low to the ground and you can't really sit up inside of them, and I don't like that. I like to be able to actually live inside my tent and not just sleep inside of it. Weather resistance, both the Duplex and the Triplex, they're made of the same material, the Dyneema, and it's a great material. It's very light and it's very weather resistant. If there's no holes in the canopy of the tent, we never had an issue of rain getting inside, of snow getting inside. Once you get basically these flaps kind of just come straight down and attach to a little hook, and once you close these up, you know, you're pretty much impermeable. Weather's not really going to get in. We had both high winds and very snowy conditions on our through hikes. Once you get these cinched down, and really if you have good stake support, it's all about the stakes. If you're in loose gravelly dirt, you know, the wind can blow the stakes out of the ground and can cause an issue, and we've had that a few times. But again, that's just if you have bad dirt, bad gravel, and you're staking straight into gravel, that one can blow this straight out of the ground. But as long as you have good loam, just regular dirt, and you get those stakes pretty far in the ground and you cinch everything down, the wind's really not going to be an issue. I did find that these tents can be kind of loud in the wind, even if you got everything cinched down all the way. This Dyneema really flaps around a lot and can be kind of loud. It's not too big of an issue. Just bring earplugs. I always carry earplugs when backpacking, but that's also something to consider. And snow, I talked about. These do pretty well in the snow. Sometimes these can bow in, the roof can bow in a little bit under the snow weight, but this triangular shape really sheds the snow off pretty well. As long as you got it set up correctly and there's not a bunch of ripples in the fabric where the snow can get caught in. As long as you got the tension down correctly and it's all flat, the roof, the snow is really not that big of an issue either. Something else I really like about the Zpacks tents is the overall flexibility, the footprint flexibility, and just, you know, the general flexibility of these tents. If you lose a stake, you can always tie these guy lines to a tree, so you're really not too dependent on the stakes. I mean, it's going to be a lot easier with stakes, but if you have trees around, you can always make this work in a cinch. It's basically, it can work like a tarp, and we've had it where the soil was so loose, so gravelly, where we couldn't really get the stakes in the ground, so we tied these side guy lines onto a tree, and that worked. That'll get you through in a pinch. So that flexibility is also very nice. And then also just the footprint flexibility. These things, the Triplex is a big tent, you know. I'm inside here, and I got just feet of room, and it's got a really big footprint. The Duplex a little bit less so. But both these tents, the Duplex obviously a little more because it's a little smaller. But you can pretty much, we found that you can pretty much fit them in anywhere. You don't really need a really flat piece of ground to set up on. We've slept on really sloped ground with these, and we've slept in really small spaces. You don't have this with a freestanding tent because the poles kind of make the structure very rigid, and you can't really squeeze in between trees and stuff. But with these, if there's a packed campground, or if you're like sleeping in a very overgrown area with a lot of trees, you can actually like shrink the size of the Duplex and Triplex to kind of mold to the space that you're sleeping in. And that really comes in handy if you're in the backcountry and there's no actual campgrounds. Like on the CDT, a lot of the nights we were just sleeping on the side of the trail. There's no actual campgrounds. But these things are really flexible, and you can pretty much fit them in, you know, reasonably into almost any piece of ground that you find. This is probably one of the most important pros on the list. Zpacks, I have found, has very good customer support. I have a bunch of Zpacks poles that came with these tents, and those I found to be not super durable, and they'd break a lot. So I wouldn't really recommend those for a through hike because they break far too easily in snow and rock. But yeah, Zpacks replaced pretty much every single one of the poles that broke. I probably replaced poles with them probably 6, maybe 7 times, and every single time they're like, yep, you broke your pole, we'll send you a new one. And they don't even question it. It's a really easy return process. And then also, with the tents themselves, they will do repairs on the tent. I've done pretty small repairs on the tents. I think they will do more extensive repairs if there are holes in the tent and stuff. They may charge you, I'm not sure. But I've had the zipper replaced on this triplex. That's a con I'm gonna talk about a little bit. But they placed the zipper on this tent on both sides without any extra charge. I just sent it into them and they didn't even question it. They didn't really ask why the zipper was not functioning. They just did it. They just have some pretty good customer support. And you should kind of expect that. It's a $800 tent, $700 tent. So it's quite an expensive investment. But I never had an issue with their customer support. And that really is a huge pro. Now some of these repairs, when you're on the trail, you know, it can be hard. If your zipper goes out and you're in the middle of nowhere, you can't really send your tent in and stop hiking for your tent to be returned because you're pretty much on a pretty rigorous schedule. But that's not their problem. It's more just the durability of these tents, and that's where we're gonna get into the cons. First con I'm gonna talk about is the durability. Generally, these tents are pretty durable, they're pretty rugged, they'll last you a whole through hike. But we found on both of our through hikes that the zippers failed on both sides of the tent, and that really happens because they're pretty minimalist zippers, and the dust gets into them. It really makes it pretty much impossible to fully zip, and they'll kind of hang open. Your mesh door will hang open. And we had a problem with mice climbing in, insects getting in. At the end of both of our through hikes, the PCT and the CDT, all the doors failed on both of these tents. And you really don't want to be dealing with that stuff. So that's a pretty big con, just the zipper system. I really think they should go with a heavier weight zipper that is less prone to breaking and getting jammed up. You can do some temporary fixes with like pliers. I found if you squeeze the zipper to be tighter, extend the life on that zipper a little bit and fix the issue, but it's really a temporary solution. Ultimately, you're gonna have to get that zipper replaced, and that's where the customer support comes in. They'll replace it, no questions asked, but when you're through hiking, when you're on a long backpacking trip, you really don't want those things to fail, and we found that they do fail pretty consistently. And then also, this is where the material, the actual thickness of the Dyneema comes into play. But the Duplex, we have the thinner material, the 55 ounce per square yard thread count material as the actual canopy. And that stuff will get pinholes in it after extended use. Towards the end of the trail, we were pretty consistently trying to patch up those holes with tent patches. And you really want to do that because those holes rainwater will be able to get through those holes and leak into your tent. And that's an issue I found with that lighter material. Now the triplex, we upped the game and got the slightly heavier. Again, it's only 0.14 pounds heavier, but the 75 ounce per square yard canopy material, the Dyneema, as opposed to the 55. And we found that we never had any pinholes in the canopy once we switched to that thicker material on the PCT. So I would do that. I'd definitely switch to the thicker material, but it's hard to say. The durability of these tents, it's mostly how you treat them. You know, if you're in a really gritty area, a lot of sand, your zippers can fail with the thin material, your canopy can fail. But overall, their durability is pretty good. Now, they're not as durable as a traditional thick tent. Those things will last you a lifetime, and these can if you get them repaired. That's the main thing. But yeah, the durability is kind of a con. I'd say they're on the lower end of the durability scale when talking about tents, but they'll still last you a full through hike and beyond that if you get them repaired. And that's the big thing, you get them repaired. Now, if you're in the field, that sucks getting them repaired. But I expect these tents to last me with maintenance and repairs. I expect them to last me, especially this triplex with thicker material. It'll probably last me 20 more years. You know, it's got a pretty good lifespan as long as you're doing maintenance. So when I'm talking about pinholes, I mean, you can probably see a pinhole right there. There's just tiny little tears in the fabric that create these little openings where water can seep through. And I passed right here to try to fix one, but it's hard to make on the camera, but they kind of run all the way up here. You can see right there. And they're pretty extensive in this Duplex I have. which is again made of the thinner Dyneema material. So there's some right there. Okay, here's some more obvious ones. This is right by the adjusting line. But as you can see, as I move my camera around, you can kind of see the light shining through them. And those are exactly what I'm talking about when you get these little pinholes and tears in the canopy of the Zpacks tent. That only happened in this Duplex, which is made of the thinner Dyneema. We never had this issue at all through our through hike of the PCT, where we had the thicker material on the Triplex. So really, I think upgrading to the thicker material and just eating the extra weight on the thicker material, which is very minimal, as I keep saying, but I really think it's a worthwhile upgrade, especially if you don't want to keep maintaining this tent throughout your long hike or even weekend hikes. It's kind of just annoying in general to have to keep up on these, and it's not really an issue Zpacks is really going to be able to fix, because there's so many of these holes in this lighter material that they're not going to take the time to fix every single one of them. It's really something you have to do, that you have to patch up. Also here in the Duplex, I'm going to talk about the zipper failure. I never had the Duplex repaired. I had the Triplex zippers repaired, but this is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the zipper failure that happens. You can see I'm trying to close this zipper, and really towards the beginning you can kind of work past it, and by holding this up while you're zipping, it'll sometimes close, but towards the end your zipper will pretty much become useless, and your door mesh will just be hanging open, as you can see on both sides. You can see here too. That zipper won't have moved. It's just completely jammed up. This side too. The other side works a little bit, but you can still see it's not really gonna stay closed. The zipper is just broken, and you're gonna have to send this into Zpacks to get that zipper replaced. Ultimately, you can do some minor repairs with pliers by just kind of pinching the zipper tighter, just adding a little compression onto that zipper and closing up a bit, and that'll work temporarily. We use that, but ultimately you're gonna have to get this repaired, and that is the biggest downfall of these tents, is the zippers, because it's a real pain when you're through hiking on a long hike and the zippers won't close, your doors won't close, and there's mice crawling inside your tent. We had it multiple times, mice crawling inside, insects trying to get your food. It's really just an annoyance, and you'll survive, but it's really something I think Zpacks has to work on. Secondly, this one's the most obvious, is just the price. One of these traditional tents, the freestanding tents with tent poles, they run like 2 to 3 person tents, 1 to 2 person tents, $200 to $300. You can find them less and more expensive, obviously, but I found the average should be around $200 or $300. Now, when compared to these Zpacks tents, this one ran me, it's going now for $799, $800. It ran me $850, so that's a pretty penny. And these duplexes run for about $100 less, $699, so $700. So these things are almost three to 4 times more expensive than a traditional tent. Now that's an investment you might want to make when you're doing a through hike. For weekend hikes, it's really not necessary. For shorter trips, it's not necessary, really. The weight savings. If you're going out every weekend, maybe it is worth it. Again, the ease of mind, just throwing the tent in your backpack, not having to worry about the weight. But for a through hike, I think it's a worthwhile investment. It's an expensive investment. It's 3 to 4 times more than a regular tent. But you know, if you're sleeping in it for 6 months straight, 5 months straight, I think it's a very worthwhile investment. That 3 to 4 pounds saving in weight is going to save your back a lot of strain, and you know, it's really it's up to you ultimately to make the decision if it's within your price range and if you can afford it. And lastly, I talked about it a bit before, but the condensation in these single wall tents can be pretty bad. This Dyneema doesn't really breathe very well. But yeah, these things ventilate fairly well in hot environments. I found them to be more comfortable than most of the double wall tents I've slept in higher environments. But at the same time, they definitely don't breathe as well. And this Dyneema material just really captures the condensation. And even in like arid environments, like in New Mexico and such, we wake up and the whole inside of the tent would be just water running down the sides. In the winter, it'd be frozen inside. You'd have ice. And again, that's not too big of an issue if you're short, but if you're tall and your sleeping bag is rubbing against the side throughout the night, you can wake up and your toe box and your head can be a little bit wet, and that moisture will drip down on you throughout the night as well. So that's something to take into account. I think the weight savings definitely are worth that condensation factor, but again, that's a trade-off. That's a pretty substantial con with these single wall tents. So that's pretty much the pros and cons that I see. And I think these tents are pretty much really for backpackers, for long distance walkers. If you're car camping, the double wall tent is definitely going to be better for you. If you're primarily car camping, I wouldn't really use this for car camping. I'd use my freestanding tent any day for car camping. Again, for the lack of condensation and just for the warmth factor. If it's cold out, the double wall tent's going to be warmer. Now, my ultimate recommendation, if you're set on buying one of these Zpacks tents, I would recommend, even if you're through hiking, I don't think the weight savings are worth it, but I would definitely recommend getting the 0.75 ounces per square yard Dyneema thickness on the canopy over the 50 or the 0.55 ounce per square yard Dyneema thickness. The thinner material we found develops pinholes throughout your through hike and your backpacking trips, and that'll just be something else you have to maintain, which you really don't want to be doing if you're hiking 25 miles a day and you barely have any time to relax. And the weight savings, I don't think, are worth getting the thinner material. So I would just, even if you're through hiking, it's only 0.14, 0.13 pounds heavier to get the thicker material. So definitely I would go with the thicker material. It's basically based off the color. Some of the colors are the thicker material, some of them are the lighter material. The traditional blue color is the lighter thickness, and the olive green is the lighter thickness tent. This is the spruce green color. This is the thicker material. And sometimes, I don't know if it's available right now, but the burnt orange material or color also has the thicker material. So just keep that in mind when purchasing. I think whoever gets these tents, I think a thicker material is going to be better for you, especially for long trips where you're not going to want to do maintenance on these tents. That's my main takeaway. Okay, so that's my review of the Zpacks tents, comparing them to more traditional freestanding tents. Ultimately, I think I made my point pretty clear with the Zpacks tents. They're really good tents. I love them. I will keep using them. But at the same time, they have some cons. Ultimately, if you're going on a long hike, I think the weight savings makes those cons worthwhile. They're expensive. They aren't the most durable. Customer support can make up for that a bit. And ultimately, I think they're a great purchase if you have the money, and I recommend them fully. I hope this review was useful if you're deciding on whether or not to buy a Zpacks tent, if you're through hiking, if you're going on a long backpacking trip, or if you backpack every weekend and just want to get that weight down. I recommend them fully.